people are like, wait, aren't you a believer? Aren't you like a Jesus follower? And how are you talking about manifestation? And I'm like, the way that I see it is this is no different than gravity. Like there are laws in this universe that we operate within, whether we know we're operating in them or not. Welcome to the High Vibe Life podcast, where we are obsessed with all things manifestation, neuroscience, personal growth, and quite simply, living a life beyond our wildest dreams. I'm Moira Casava, author, speaker, podcaster, manifestation, and mindset master. Since getting sober 25 years ago, I've helped tens of thousands of women break through and achieve massive levels of wealth, joy, and freedom. Now it's your turn. Let's dig in. Welcome back to the podcast, you guys. I am thrilled to be able to pop in here and do kind of a short little solo episode for you. There's something that's been on my heart that I've talked about a ton of different times, on social media, probably touched on in different podcast episodes over literally, dare I say, the years. The years? I can't believe I've been doing this podcast for this long. But it's a nuance that is quite possibly the missing ingredient to you achieving your dreams. So I do a lot of work around, and we got to touch on this for a second, around law of attraction and manifestation. And then I always get questions in my inbox, not a ton, but every once in a while, people are like, wait, aren't you a believer? Aren't you like a Jesus follower? And how are you talking about manifestation? And I'm like, that's like kind of the way that I interpret this. And this is not me being like argumentative, but the way that I see it is this is no different than gravity. Like there are laws in this universe that we operate within, whether we know we're operating in them or not, right? The law of gravity exists whether we're kind of thinking about it or not thinking about it. So the way that I have always looked at manifestation, law of attraction, things like that is it is God-given. Like it's the way that the world was created. And if you look in the Bible, and that's not what this episode is about, you can find references all throughout. And so we're going to dig into, again, what I think is really this slight nuance, this missing ingredient where people are like, listen, I am saying my prayers, I'm doing the visualization, I'm doing my morning process, I'm doing all these things, but nothing's happening. What is going wrong? So here it is. You have to step into the emotion or the actual vibration, this is where I lose a lot of people sometimes, of that, the fact that it is like, and I always say, and it is done, right? And it is done. Meaning, for instance, if I'm trying to think of a good example that would just really help with this lesson is, well, let's take most people's number one thing. They want to earn more income, right? So if I am, say, trying to start a business and I'm making pennies, right? It's like the entrepreneur hustle. I'm working my tail off and I'm not making any money yet. And I'm in this reality of like, oh, this is so hard and I'm not making any money. But my goal and my vision is to be, break 6 figures or 7 figures, whatever it is for you. And you have this big goal and you have this big dream, and there's moments where you believe that it's so possible, but your day in, day out reality and emotional home is like kind of destitute, right? Like I'm scraping my pennies together. I haven't quite made it at all. Like I'm working so hard and you're just living, your reality is struggle. Well, the way that I believe the world works is you put out, whatever you put out, you get back, right? So if I'm putting out the vibration of struggle, I will continue to get struggle back, right? So you have to really pay attention to your emotional home of where you're operating in the majority of the time. If you are visualizing for 10 minutes in the morning, that's amazing. But if you are then shifting into a 12-hour workday of struggle, the struggle is going to win out. And so here's another little nuance I want to give you. So often we think about our goals and our vision as something that we really desire, obviously, right? We really want this thing. Like, I want to get that promotion. I want that promotion more than anything, but I don't have it. And that feels like, some contrast there. That feels like, there's some negative emotion there. Well, what you put out is what you're going to get back. That's what you're going to receive back. You're not going to get the promotion. I know this might sound like crazy to some people, and then there's probably a lot of people in my audience that are like, girl, I totally get this. I always teach people we don't get what we want, we get what we believe. We don't get what we want, we get what we believe. So for instance, I work with a lot of women day in and day out that are hustling for a specific goal. And we have crafted the vision. We have reverse engineered the exact actions. They know the metrics they need to hit for the month, the week, the day, the actions they got to take. And then we get on a call and they'll say something like, Moira, I'm doing everything. I am working. I am hustling. But I don't think this is going to happen. And I unfortunately look at them and I say, girl, it's not going to happen. And they're like, oh, what? You told me I could do this? And I'm like, I do believe you can. I believe you can do this. I 100% believe that this is 100% possible and can absolutely happen. But the fact that you don't have that belief means it's not going to happen, right? Here's another example. Let's go back like almost a decade. The first time I went, quote unquote, top 10 in my coaching company, I shouldn't have been top 10. Like, I was the new person on the street, like having like the success that was unheard of. And the whole year leading up to that, I was like, I don't know how this is happening, but like, it's just happening. Like, I feel like this insane, crazy thing is, so the belief was, my thought process was, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I feel like it's just going to magically happen. And guess what happened? It all fell into place and I became top 10 because of my belief, not my obsession with how it was going to happen, but my conviction and my knowingness that it absolutely was. And trust me, I have also had the exact opposite happen in my professional life, where I have worked harder than I've ever worked in my life for a goal, and I am an achiever. And my underneath, kind of that resonance underneath all of that, said somewhere deep down inside, I just don't think it's going to happen. Like, I know I'm doing everything I can, but like, I have this feeling, right? It's not going to happen. And so guess what? It didn't happen. So how do we fix that? How do we shift that? Well, there's a lot of strategies and there's a lot of things that I teach, right? One of them, you've got to kind of just, I always talk about vision. So in that morning process, when you're kind of hammering that vision like on repeat into you're wiring it in, you're helping to cement the belief into your brain and your psyche and your emotional state. But again, it might not be enough to tip the scales, right? So we have to look at our belief system. We have to look at, if there's a nagging suspicion that this might not happen, where does that come from? We've got to uncover the self-limiting beliefs, right? So there's some work there that has to be done. It's almost like you literally have a circuit in your brain that's wired up, that you've wired probably for decades, that's limiting you from believing that it's possible. And you have to quite literally disassemble that belief system and wire a new one up, right? I actually have a podcast episode on how to disassemble a belief, a self-limiting belief, and reassemble a self-serving belief, right? One that empowers you, an empowering belief. So you can go look at that podcast episode. We'll actually link it in the show notes. But what I want to focus on today is this little nuance of becoming it, stepping into the identity and the reality that it's already happened. One of my favorite books that I pick up again and again and again is Wayne Dyer's book, Wishes Fulfilled. And what he's talking about is this very thing, that we have to step into the energy now, when we don't have the thing, of having already had the wish fulfilled, right? And I'm going to give you an example of when I started to do this work almost a decade ago. I was working with a good friend of mine who's a coach. And back then I did have the goal of becoming the number one top coach, quote unquote. And I wanted to be number one out of 400,000 people. Like, talk about a lofty goal. And she would just talk to me during our sessions and she would say, it's done. It's done. You just haven't accepted it yet. Like, you haven't come to the belief yet that it is already done. And she would say things like, Moira, how does the top coach show up to this meeting? How does the top coach drive their car? How does the top coach eat their breakfast? How does the top coach interact with their children? And so how does the top coach get, like, what do they wear? What do they dress like in the morning? And it wasn't like I was getting in a power suit, right? But that idea of that 2 millimeter shift into being it now, not wanting it in the future. If you're feeling want, you're keeping it in the future. If you're feeling that it is now your reality, you will draw it into your reality so fast. I'm going to give you a real concrete example of when I looked back and I realized exactly how I did this without knowing what I was doing at the time. So when I started my coaching career, I obviously was not making any money at first. You know, you're an independent contractor, entrepreneur. So you're working a ton for next to nothing. You know, welcome to entrepreneurship. I've been in it since I was 21 years old. But I was tracking my income, right? So month one, and I'm going to just throw out very fictitious numbers, but say month one I made like $300. And then month two, I made like $800. Month three, I made $1,500. Month four, it was $2,000. Month six, it was $3,000. Like, again, fictitious numbers. But every single week, I was calculating my income. Not just month. Every single week, I was calculating my income. And it was growing every single week. And every single week, I would take that number and I would multiply it by 52. And in my brain, that was how much income I was earning. So say that, for example, you know, in the beginning of the year, I was making $300 a month. By the end of the year, fictitious again, I'm just throwing out numbers to make the point. Say I was making $10,000 a month. So the week I made $10,000, I was like, okay, 10,000 times 52. Or I'm sorry, 10,000 times 12. I was like, whoa, that was a lot more money than I thought. 10,000 a month times 12 months. I was like, I make $120,000. And I really believed that. Like, I wasn't trying to play a mind game with myself. I was looking at that as fact and reality. Fast forward a few months, and my husband did our taxes. And he came back to me and he was like, congratulations, babe, you made this much money last year. And it was so much lower than I thought. And I literally said, like, kind of quick and defensively, I was like, no, I didn't. And he's like, yeah, you did. I just did the taxes. And I was like, no, I didn't. And he's like, Moira, I pulled all the numbers. I did our taxes. I calculated it. And I was like, that's wrong. And I wasn't trying to be mean, but I was like in disbelief. I was like, that is absolutely, that is invalid. There's no possible way that can be true because I look at my numbers every single week and this is how much money I earn. I was taking my highest week, month, and timesing it by the number that would add up to the annual income. He was taking the reality of what that looked like. Does this make sense? But here's the nuance. When I was in the identity of stepping into being a 6-figure earner or a 7-figure earner even, I was showing up as that because it was my belief system. So for example, when I would work really hard and I would want to quit and cry and not keep going, I would tell myself like, gosh, I earn a lot of income. Like, this isn't that hard for what I'm earning. But if I had looked at the reality of what I was making, I would have quit. It would have impacted my actions, right? When I would get on a call and somebody would ask me to guest speak, I felt super confident because I'm wildly successful in this versus not seeing the success or not feeling the success and showing up as that unconfident, insecure person. And, then there's, however I'm presenting in that persona versus the confident one. And so this idea of showing up in the world, showing up to your meetings, showing up to your interactions, showing up to the massage, showing up to lunch as the person you want to become now is everything. It is everything. Again, if you are sitting in want and desire, you have to switch that to it is already done, and it is done. Be it now. Be her now, right? And you start to make these little decisions with maybe the clothing you put on, or I used to have my friend Bo Eason. If you haven't read this book, by the way, There's No Plan B for Your A Game. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And Bo Eason has a quote in there where a story, he was a professional football player. And he said, when they would walk into the locker room, there was a sign, a legitimate sign that just said players only beyond this point. Meaning no media, nobody else, players only beyond this point. And he said every time you walked in that locker room, you stepped into an identity. There was an energy there that was, you were an NFL player, right? And so I put that about 10 years ago, I put that on my closet door. And it's a walk-in closet into, where I get ready and all my clothes are and everything. Players only beyond this point, meaning I'm gonna walk into this closet and prepare for the day in a different identity, right? In a higher identity, in a different vibration. And I'm going to step into my world up here versus down here, right? In a different, I'm going to show up in that vision statement, in those goals, all the things I have written out. I'm just going to step into it. That's the life I live. And when you step into that energy, that's when things are orchestrated like beyond your comprehension, right? It feels like for me this past week, somebody asked me the other day, they're like, how are you doing? It's been a really hard week. And I'm like, ugh. God didn't just move one mountain, he moved like 8 mountains. I couldn't script what has happened in my life. If it is beyond my wildest dreams, what has happened in the last week could never have happened if I wasn't showing up in the identity and the belief that it was going to happen, that God was going to move mountains, that miracles were going to come out of this, that this was all for the better, right? We're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but do you see the energy that I was in? And so therefore, what showed up in my life? So I hope this makes sense to you guys, but it's just this nuance, the shift of energy from want and desire to reality. And my friends, it makes all the difference. It is the differentiator. So guys, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Make sure, if you will, to tag me in this episode. I love to hear your feedback on all of these topics, what you want to hear more of, what you want to maybe hear less of. But give me your feedback because I love it more than anything. And something else exciting that we have coming up, I did this maybe 18 months ago. We're going to do some podcast episodes just around Q&A. So I'm going to take your questions. So look for that on Instagram and just do some open forum Q&A sessions. So look forward to that, and we will see you next week.